Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Dialogue with ADA. My name is Shamir Robinson, and I am the Director of Nutrition at the American Diabetes Association. And I am so excited to be here with you this month. Not only is March National Nutrition Month, but it's also National Kidney Month. And that is why we have joined forces with DaVita to bring you a cooking demonstration with the amazing Jackie Turmont. Jackie, welcome. We're so grateful to have you. Please take a moment to introduce yourselves and tell us what we'll be making today.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm excited to be here too. This is such a great partnership, and I think it's a long time coming. So this is really, really exciting. And I know a lot of the dietitians within DaVita are really excited when they heard about this partnership. So my name is Jackie Turmont, and I have been with DaVita since September of 2008, so about 12 and a half years. I really love what I do. I really love my patients. They're a lot of fun to interact with. It's really great to get to know them, which is one of the reasons I love my job. So the recipe that we're going to make today is called grilled lime chicken fajitas. And it's really easy. I made it the other day, so I'm excited to show you about it.
All right. Well, let's get started. What's first?
Okay. So the first thing I'm going to do, well, one of the first things that I do when I cook is it's really important to read the entire recipe all the way through. I've started so many recipes where it says, let this sit for an hour. And I'm like, oh, crap. So that is my biggest tip, is to make sure you read it all the way through. And so with this recipe, you make a marinade and you have to let it sit for 20 minutes to an hour. So I actually did that earlier. So I have some chicken ready to go, but I'll go ahead and show you how to do the marinade first. It's pretty simple. So it's got a lime in it. It has cilantro. And then what I usually do is lay out the spices that I need so that I can just grab them as I'm going. It's easier than trying to run back and forth with the cabinet. So I have a large lime. And when I zest the lime, I have one of the little micro zesters, which is amazing. And I've already washed it. So what I usually do is just kind of hold the lime in my hand and then just zest it this way. And I find it a little bit easier to control because these things can be sharp. And so that is usually what I like to do. And I also have, you also have to juice this lime. So I have a little glass juicer that I've had forever. But if you don't have a juicer, you can just kind of roll the lime on the counter, which kind of gets the juice flowing. And I usually just cut it in half and you can just squeeze it. So you don't have to have the fancy juicer in order to get that done.
I love those tips, Jackie. Can you tell us a little bit about what are the benefits of marinating that protein before you cook it?
Yeah, that's a great question. So a lot of the times the marinades, now this one doesn't have oil in it, but a lot of times the marinades will help to kind of soften up those fibers in the meat that you're making. And then it can also kind of seal in the juices so it keeps it from drying out, which a lot of people don't want to eat dried meats. So the marinade tends to help kind of combat that a little bit. And it gives it a lot of flavor rather than maybe just a little bit of pepper. This recipe has cumin in it, garlic powder. It's got chili powder, black pepper, and then the lime and a little bit of sweetness with some artificial sweetener. So it just kind of gives it a kick.
Yes, I love it. And talking about ways to boost that flavor, and we don't have to always add salt, but there are tons of seasonings and spice options. And as long as we work those into our foods, we can still get that big flavor.
Yeah, exactly. And then the other thing that's in here, because it is a Latin dish, it's got cilantro in it. And cilantro always comes in these huge bundles. So if you like that, you can kind of keep it, and we can wrap it up and keep it with foil in the refrigerator. And that will kind of help it from getting too wilted. So what I usually do is just kind of pop the tops off of any kind of herb, not just cilantro, but if you're working with parsley or basil, any other kind of herb, it's just kind of nice to pop off the top so you don't have to mess with the stems quite as much. And this only calls for 2 tablespoons, so you don't need very much. So what I usually like to do is just kind of take my knife and leave the tip on the board. I just kind of roll it across the herbs. And I just kind of go back and forth. And it just chops it up so you don't have these huge leaves on your chicken or in whatever you're making.
Wonderful. Wonderful. I see we have people continuing to trickle in, and I just want to welcome everybody to our cooking demonstration. Jackie, do you want to give them the quick title again? What are we making today for
Yeah,
everyone who's just joined in?
sure. It's called grilled line chicken fajitas, and it is on the ADA website.
Doesn't that sound delicious, everyone? Yes, excited, very excited.
And then that's about 2 tablespoons of the cilantro. I have a little measure, which is perfect for that. And then I usually keep an extra bowl on the counter for wraps, so you don't have to keep running back and forth to the sink. So I just kind of throw what I don't need into that bowl. Another little tip. I think that's a Rachel Ray tip. Okay. So right now I have the lime zest, the lime juice, and the cilantro. So the next thing to go in are the spices. So like I said, I just kind of line those up so I'm ready to go. So the first one is a teaspoon of chili powder. And of course, these are all spices that you can use in pretty much anything. So it's not like you'll buy them and then they'll go to waste. So I always have these kind of spices in my cabinet. And black pepper, it's a 1/4 teaspoon of black pepper. A little bit loud. And then a 1/2 teaspoon of cumin. Gives it a nice kick. I don't know if people use cumin very often, but it's got a good flavor.
Yeah, I was just going to ask you about that. So when you're adding cumin or when you're adding chili powder, can you talk to us about what type of flavor does that bring, especially for people who might not be familiar with those spices?
Yeah. So the chili powder, this particular chili powder is not very spicy. I like the Latin American food, the Mexican food, but I am a wimp when it comes to spices. So the chili powder is not very hot. So the ones it's pretty mild. And the cumin is it's like a warm spice. So it's not spicy at all, but it's almost like what you would taste in a chili. So it's got a good smoky kind of flavor. And then the pepper just gives it a nice little kick. And then the garlic powder, because the garlic salt is something that our patients should stay away from in dialysis and those who have kidney disease, because you don't want all of that salt, which can cause that high blood pressure, cause that fluid retention. So that's something that we always teach our patients. And then the other thing is a little bit of artificial sweetener, or you can use honey. Of course, the artificial sweetener won't give as much of that sugar or that carbohydrate that we get if you use actual honey. So the honey is about a tablespoon, but if you did the artificial sweeteners, it's just 2 packets. And I like to use the stevia as a sweetener. And then I have my chicken here just waiting for me. Just so I don't have to get my hands all sticky, I use tongs to put it into the marinade. And then it's not a lot of marinade, so what I usually do is just sort of roll it around in here to cover the chicken. And as it sits, it'll kind of bring in some of that flavor. So you just kind of stir it up. Hopefully you can see that. Kind of bring it up to the camera a little bit. But what I did earlier is I made the marinade and then I put it in a bag. And I let it sit in the refrigerator. So even if you wanted to make this the night before, you can do that, and you can just let it sit. And then when you get home from a long day, you have it ready to go. Kind of see the chicken there. So it's got a nice red kind of color.
Okay. Beautiful.
So that is the easy part. The next part is getting the peppers and the onions ready to go. So we're going to chop those up, and those are going to cook first because they take a little bit longer.
Sounds good. And Jackie, I think we're getting a little bit of feedback. We might need to adjust the phone just a tad. I'll see if we can continue to have that.
Okay. Turn myself down a little bit. I might have it too low. Is that a little bit better?
Let's see. We'll keep rolling and see if we continue to hear it.
Okay, sounds good. Okay, so what I usually do when I cut up pepper, I kind of learned over time the easiest thing to do, but what I figured out recently, all the seeds are in the center. So what I usually do is just kind of go around the sides and slice it in 4, almost like a square. And then it just leaves the seeds kind of where you can just throw them out, and then you don't have a lot of mess and a lot of waste.
That scrap bowl. And I'm trying to see here. We're still getting some feedback. Sorry, everyone. Trying to see if we can resolve this here. I'm going to turn it down on my end as well.
Okay.
Just to make sure.
Gotta love technology.
I know.
One of those days. Okay.
Okay,
So
we'll try to power through and see if we can get it figured out. But I love it. So we are making our chicken fajitas. If someone isn't using chicken, what are some other protein options they might be able to throw into the mix, Jackie?
Yeah, so I know that people get tired of chicken, so they could do pork or they could do steak. For vegetarians, you could do beans. And in the past, we always kind of told, especially our dialysis patients, to be careful with beans because it's got a lot of potassium and a lot of phosphorus in there. But there's also a lot of fiber and a lot of other good nutrients that we don't want to cut out of the diet. So with different research that's come around, we've seen that you don't absorb a lot of those, that your body can't break all of that down. So I've even had patients be able to incorporate those things back in and be able to enjoy some of those foods we told them they really had to be careful with in the past. So if I tell patients, because they get tired of having meat all the time, that if they want to do that as a protein source, then that's sort of replacing the meat that they're not getting. And then they get some of that vegetarian protein.
A beautiful tip. Thank you for that.
Sure. And like I said, this recipe doesn't have an oil in it. I usually use the cooking spray on the pan so it doesn't stick so much. And you can do this on an outside grill, but I'm doing it in a grill pan today. So we have the peppers that will go in. You can probably hear them sizzling. And then I'm going to cut up onion next. Usually I just kind of slice off the top and the bottom. And then you want to kind of peel the skin off of that. You don't want to eat that papery skin.
And does it matter what type of onion you use for something like this?
So this is just a yellow onion. It's not quite as strong as like a red onion, but if you were looking for something a little stronger, you can certainly get a red onion, a Vidalia onion. So it's not really any reason you would have to use this one. I think a lot of people I personally like the taste of the red onions when they're cooked. I don't like them raw. They're really strong, but they're really good when they're cooked. They have such a good flavor. So, and I kind of leave them just like a little bit of a wedge, kind of a strip, just so that it has some sustenance to it. And I'll just put that in the pan too. Get that going. And it takes about 15 minutes for the vegetables to kind of soften up to where you want them. Now I'm going to cut up this other pepper so we have it all in there ready to go.
So I know that.
Yeah.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say what I found the other day is when I was doing this, I kind of let the vegetables go by themselves, and then I added the chicken in, which is what the recipe called for. But when it's on the grill, you can cook them at the same time on an outdoor grill. But I think about halfway through cooking the vegetables, you could throw the chicken in there with it and kind of let them cook together. And I think then some of the vegetables will pick up some of that flavor of the chicken too, I think. So I'm gonna try that today. In the interest of time as well.
Yeah, such great tips. And I'm excited because it's slowly but surely getting warmer out. So I know a lot of people will be ready to get on the grill and fire it up.
Oh, yeah. I love getting on the grill when it's nice outside, especially when it's not too hot outside yet.
Exactly.
So I just have a rubber spatula, and I just kind of move these around in the pan and just kind of let them get soft. You don't want them to be too crispy in the fajita, so just kind of let them get soft and let them get some of those grill marks on there.
So I know we've added peppers and we've added onions. Any other non-starchy vegetables that you would recommend throwing in if someone was looking to add just a few more veggies?
Yeah. I like to have, I mean, you could do a different kind of a pepper, but even mushrooms would be pretty good because they're a little earthy, you know? So something like that would be good to throw in there. Trying to think of what else would be good. I hadn't really thought about that. That's a good question. I think that would give it a little bit of, well, I like mushrooms. I know people don't, but I think that would give it a nice, like earthy kind of taste. I'll have to think on that. Think if I can think of something else. And then this
I'm with
also
you though. I think
has, yeah, this also has a little bit of salsa on the top when you serve it. And one of the things that we teach our patients on dialysis is they again have to watch for potassium. But we also don't want to cut a lot of foods out. My goal is always to try to figure out a way that they can keep the things that they like. So the peppers and the onions tend to be lower in potassium. The tomatoes tend to be a little bit higher. So it's just watching the portion size of how much you use with the dish. So this one calls for about a tablespoon per serving. So you still get that flavor, but you're not cutting it out completely, and you're kind of keeping that potassium still on the lower side. So that's just something I wanted to kind of point out too.
I love that so much, Jackie. And I think that's just a great philosophy to adopt in general for all of us as we're striving to eat a healthy, balanced plate, thinking about what foods we can add to that while still keeping some
Mm-hmm.
of our favorites. So, not taking away, but what can we add and how can we make sure that we're still enjoying the foods that are near and dear to our hearts?
Yeah, exactly. Because I think sometimes people see things that say, "Oh, be careful with this and be careful with that," and their first thought is, "I can never eat that again," and that's just, I went into this profession because I like to eat and I like to cook. So to think that I couldn't have something ever again is it's pretty hard. So I try to work through
Exactly.
that.
I am with you on that.
Yeah. So it's really important. And food is something that is, people gather around it. People are always in the kitchen. So it's just hard to have to take things away from people. So I'm going to go ahead and add the chicken. So like I said, I had it in a bag earlier. So this has been sitting. I did this morning, so it's been sitting a little while, but it smells really good. So what I'm going to do is just kind of pull it out of the bag, and you let it sit for cook for about 12 minutes, I think is what I did the other day, and it gave it some good grill marks. But you want to flip it halfway so that you can get both sides, and you want to make sure you're not eating any raw meat. So if you have a thermometer, it should reach about 165 Fahrenheit once it's cooked fully. And it looks pretty. It's got the cilantro on it, so it's got some green on there, so it looks really pretty. And hopefully you can see that okay. I don't know if I can you see that grill? There we go. Okay, so that is going to cook. And then one other thing I wanted to point out is because it's a fajita, the recipe calls for tortilla. And I know that that is something to be cautious with as far as the carbohydrate content in it. So the recipe calls for corn tortillas or the low carb flour tortillas. So when I was at the store the other day, I was comparing the two, and it should be on the smaller side. So they should be about 6 inches. The corn tortillas are going to have a little bit more carbohydrate in them. So they had about 20 grams per serving. The low carb tortillas that I found that are flour have about 10 grams per serving, but they have a little more sodium than the corn tortillas. So it's kind of a trade-off to sort of, figure out where that balance is going to be. So I think just keeping in mind, and what I've always been taught and what I teach patients is that carbohydrate serving is 15 grams. So that is something to kind of take into consideration when you're balancing it out and what you have worked with as far as what your diet calls for, what your doctor has recommended, or if you have a dietitian you work with, what they have recommended. And if you really don't want to use the tortilla, you can certainly just use it without, and you can add the salsa in there and you can just make it a dish on its own with the chicken and the vegetables. So if that's something that you're really concerned about, that's something that you can do too. So really just kind of tailoring it to, what your particular diet is, because everybody is so different on their needs.
Exactly. And that's one of the beautiful things about getting into the kitchen. You can take this and use it as your foundation, but you can customize it to fit your needs. I could see people taking something like this and maybe putting it over rice or a cauliflower rice
Hmm.
maybe over quinoa. Some people might take it and put it over salad greens and just have those vegetables and the chicken or their protein of choice over a salad. So there's so many options and so many ways that you can make sure that it's tailored to you.
Yeah, exactly. And those are really good suggestions. I think it's just kind of opens up a world of what you can do with it. And, you can really incorporate what you like. So you may be trying a new recipe, but you can also incorporate things that you already know. So I think that's a really good point.
Yes, because sometimes being in the kitchen can feel intimidating and you feel like, maybe you aren't familiar, maybe you don't feel so comfortable, but there's really no right or wrong way to do it. You get in there, it's trial and error, it's your creativity, it's a place for you to try things and express yourself and figure out what you do like. So, just a
Yeah.
little bit of encouragement. There's no wrong way to go about it, and you can tailor it to make sure that it fits the foods that you like, your preferences, your spice levels. There's so many ways to play with it.
Yeah, exactly. And that's a good point too with the spices. If you do like things that are hot or they're spicy, you can always get those, spices that are a little bit hot or something to give it a little bit of a kick. Because most of the spices and herbs that are out there are safe for people with dialysis or people with diabetes that they can have those things. So you can certainly up that spice level if you wanted to. So I did put together a dish just so you could see what it looked like. I'm not sure how much time we have left, but this is sort of the end result with the flour tortilla on the bottom. It serves 10, so you would have 10 tortillas. You would take this and sort of, um, you know, distribute it among those. But this is about the portion size that it should be. So you have the chicken and then you have a little bit of the salsa on there. And we had these for dinner the other night and they were really good. Even my husband said he really liked them. So they have a really good flavor. And the marinade that's in there with that sweetness from the honey or from the artificial sweetener is actually really good. And it goes really well with those spices. So it's got a lot of good flavor without a lot of salt. So it's a huge plus.
Wonderful. So it passed the taste test. That is always great
It
to
did.
hear.
Yeah.
One more
It did.
quick question to you before we wrap up, Jackie. So I know you have your grill pan there, and you mentioned being outside on the grill, but is this something that someone could do in any or other sort of pan?
Yeah, if you didn't have a grill, so I just happened to have a grill pan, which was perfect. But I also have just a big, like saute pan. So you wouldn't need to have the grill. You can just do any kind of cooking pan. I know some people like to use the iron skillets, so even that would be really good. And just making sure that you have some of that cooking spray so it doesn't stick to the pan is probably the most important thing. But any kind of large flat pan would work for sure.
Thank you. And thank you for taking time to do this wonderful cooking demonstration with us. These chili lime chicken fajita tacos, they look so good. I'm excited to try it. For anyone interested and who wants to check this out, you can find them at diabetesfoodhub.org, along with so many other diabetes friendly recipes. So check that out and don't forget to check in with us for our next episode of Dialogue with ADA. Thank you.
Thank you.